Hi, welcome to Painting Waterfalls in Pastel with Shondell Joyce. I always start with a value sketch and a color study before I do a painting. The color study helps me figure out the composition and the palette. For the palette, we're going to be using just a few pastels, but the color sketch helps me figure out which. So starting on the darkest side, which would be a 5 value, I'm using a dark green, a dark blue, a dark violet. Then for the 4 values, various shades of grayed out purple, including a mauve. So then the red violet becomes a warmer version of the mauve. And you can see this is going to be a yellow-purple palette. For the middle values, I'm going to toss in a green. This green is a yellow green. Then versions of blue violet that are more middle values than the ones we used before. You can see they're slightly lighter. For the 2s, we're moving more towards bright yellow. This is like a cadmium yellow medium, lavender, school bus yellow, lemon yellow. And you can see the difference. One is cooler, one is warmer. Sky blue. Then I'm using a harder yellow. And a white, pure white, also a warm white with a little bit of yellow in it, and a light blue. For the composition, I'm just very lightly sketching with a new pastel just to give myself an idea of where things go before I jump in and put a little pastel behind it. Now, this is more of an underpainting to show the flow of the water and the placement of the rocks. I don't fuss or spend a lot of time on the sketch because it's going to be covered in pastel in just a few short minutes. So it would be an exercise in futility. But you get an idea that the water is pouring into a small pond at the top and then flowing over the lip of the pond to another pond. So that's what I'm looking for. This, by the way, is Catterskill Falls in New York. The first layer, I'm working from the back to the front. So I'm putting blue. This is the darkest dark in the distant waterfall. So this is blue. I'm using it to create the illusion of aerial perspective. Next comes green, and the green is an underpainting for the trees. I'm bringing some of it into the middle ground as well. This painting has a definite foreground, middle ground, and background. I'm jumping around on the values here because I'm going to mostly paint the background and then work my way forward. So the lavender is a lighter version of some of the dark violets I'm going to use in the foreground. I'm putting it in. You're looking through a lot of water vapor in this painting, so you'll see a lot of aerial perspective through the water vapor. Next, I'm putting in some of the mist, and I'm scumbling it lightly, mostly behind where the water will be, because the mist will rise from the water, from the splash of the waterfall. I'm also putting some of the fall color in at this point, especially the cooler versions of the fall color. I'm going to be more careful with the yellows in the trees later, but this is like an underpainting. So now I have a good amount of the background done. I painted the rocks matter-of-factly as I was going. I'm negative space painting the sky behind the trees, opening up the tree line, putting in some sky holes, putting in the sky, and then I'm going to use the same color for the water. So the water is basically reflecting the sky. I'm reflecting it off some of the rock layers and lightly touching them to cover the paper. Actually, I'm using ampersand pastel board, so that's the surface I prefer to work on. And then I'm going to reassert some of the tree trunks and bring the sky color down in between those trees and use it to create the river as well. I'm very lightly touching with one finger just to quietly blend. I don't want to over blend in this case and make it too misty. Just very lightly. This is the same sky color, scumbling some of that color for the mist, and then pulling that color in and around to create the water and the waterfall. Now we have the background in place. We can move a little more towards the middle ground. So when you work from the back forward, you try to think what is overlapping what. And this helps you to decide whether to work from dark to light or back to forward. In the middle ground, things are getting a little bit darker, so I'm using more of the middle values. So I'm starting off with mauve. This has some of the red color in it, as you can see in the reference photo, and I'm creating some distance between the middle ground and the background. I'm going to warm it up just a bit for the rocks towards the bottom and middle. This gives you a sense that those rocks are closer to you. And as they move further back, they get lighter. I'm sticking more towards the middle and light values still for the middle ground. I'll be putting the darker values in the foreground. I try to think, while I have this pastel in my hand, where else can I use it? And I use it in several places. You don't want it to be just in one spot, then it becomes an eye magnet. Next, I'm putting the darks in the middle ground. This dark is not very dark. It's only about a 4 value, and it's a violet color. And I'm putting the darks right underneath where you see the darks in the water. Touching up a little bit on the sky. I'm going to be pulling that water all the way down on the second waterfall. Notice the two kiss each other, but the second waterfall starts at the lip of that ravine, so I really want it to look like a bowl shape. So I'm letting the lip of the ravine overlap the water slightly, and then pulling that water down behind the trees and creating a waterfall back there. I'm also going to pull it down into the middle ground, let it define some of the shapes of the rocks. And I'm going with the pure white for the water in the middle ground instead of the sky color. So as the water comes closer to you, it's going to be a little brighter and a little warmer. In the middle ground, I'm using a 4 value that's slightly darker for some of the shadows on the rocks, the edges, and some of the darks. I'm adding some of the yellow ochre and putting some of it in the water as well on the rocks. This is where some of those fall leaves fall onto the rocks that are in the water. As we move closer, we're getting warmer and darker because color temperature changes just like value to create the illusion of perspective. So now I'm adding some of my warmer yellows and also warmer violets. This is the yellow in the fall foliage of the tree. I'm being a little more careful with this fall foliage and spelling out the tree a little better. So this creates some texture and variation. Now I'm coming in with my darkest green. And this green is an underpainting in the trees. It also is going to be in the water. I don't ever want to use a color in just one place on a painting. So I'm pulling it through the composition to create a pattern of intense darks. Now I'm bringing in some light, and this is the same bluish light of the sky. I put it in a few places, and I'm going to overlap it later with a warmer light, but I'm creating some texture in the water. It's reflecting some of the sky. I'm going to let it spill over some of the rocks in the foreground. Then I'm coming in with a warmer yellow and fleshing out some of the foliage on the trees. So I want the canopy of the tree to be really bright fall color. I'm going to pull it through the composition on both sides of the waterfall, really flesh out those trees, put a little bit of that brighter yellow in the foliage that falls on the rocks as well. This is going to warm up the whole composition, really create a sense of time and place. Next, I'm bringing in a darker version of that yellow ochre. If yellow had a 5 value, it would be this kind of brownish ochre color. I'm also bringing in some of the warm red violet to go on top of the rocks. These are jewel tones on the rocks, and they really help give the impression of wet rocks. Next, I'm bringing in some of the intense, deep, dark violet. And this is my darkest dark. This will really pull the eye forward. The darkest dark should always be in the foreground. It's closest to you. So you don't want it to be too far back. It'll fight with your illusion of perspective. Now that the darkest dark's in place, you can really see the perspective. Created some beautiful aerial perspective. Going back to the sky color, I'm adding some of that sky color to the water to create some texture in the foreground water. This helps create movement on top of this sky color. I'm going to add some of the warm white color, which is what I'm putting in now. That warm white color helps to bring that water forward. We used just pure white in the middle ground, so the warm white helps to counteract the blue of the sky color and create some texture and bring this rushing water forward with a highlight. Next, I'm going to dust. Dusting is when you scrape a sharp edge against the pastel and you allow some dust. I press it into place with another pastel board, put a few finishing touches, and voila. Join me every Wednesday night from 6 to 8:30 live through Zoom for online pastel classes. Register on my website.